then I will turn this over to Fred Safstrom as our moderator. Mary Ann Dillon is the timekeeper. And Fred, I will turn this over to you.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much, Mark. I was just scanning the names here. Did Don Schwab join us? I'm just not seeing his name. Don, are you there? So Don is expected, and if he joins us, of course, he'll have the opportunity to answer the questions as well. I thank you, welcome you all to this forum. The Housing Consortium of Everett and Snohomish County has been pleased to conduct these forums for many years, where we have an opportunity really to drill in and focus on affordable housing issues. As many of you know, affordable housing every year seems to become a greater and greater issue in municipalities, in our county, in our state, in our nation, and there's a lot of public interest, as you know, in this ever-growing issue. Our candidates are going to have an opportunity to answer several questions. I will rotate the order of answers as best I can. The candidates will each have 1 minute for an opening statement. When we get to questions, 1 minute for an answer. And then a closing statement that will determine the length based upon where we're at in time-wise near the end. Mark, I think we planned this for an hour. Am I correct on that?
That's correct. And forgive me just 1 second, Fred. We had somebody join by phone, and I just want to make sure that's not Dawn. So there's a phone number ending in 4399. If that's Dawn Schwab, it looks like it's
really
not getting any response. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Our consortium president, Mary Ann Dillon, will be our timekeeper, and Mary Ann, I think you're giving a 30-second notice on the answers, so you'll know when you're halfway through, and then she'll let you know when your time is up. If there's any questions, hearing none, we will proceed with your opening statements. We'll start with District 1. And Paul Roberts, you are kicking us off for 1 minute for an opening statement, Paul.
Thanks, Fred, and thanks to the consortium for putting this event together. So I'm running for one more term, and I'm running because we have multiple challenges, really multiple crises: budget, housing, climate, and we're changing our form of government. So my experience in the next 48 months, we're going to update our comp plan going out to 2044. Puget Sound Regional Council will update its overall planning going out to 2050. The Puget Sound Clean Air Agency, and I chair that board, will be looking at a new strategic plan, and the Sound Transit realignment and so on will move us into a new world in both housing and climate. I have a long term experience in decades in this work, and in particular in housing and in climate. My background is in economics and environmental science. I have decided to run for one more term, and if the voters let me do that, I will be working hard on those issues. And as we change to our form of government, we will have new faces on this council. I am not a new face. But my purpose will be to help make that transition.
Time is up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Mary Ann, was that a second notice that you gave in the minute in the middle? It was a little hard to hear, so.
I was trying not to speak over.
Okay, all right. So
do you want me to say it louder?
No, this time we'll recognize what that was. I thought it was just background noise, but it was
Okay.
something else.
Okay.
So, thank you. Mary Fossey, your opening statement.
Thank you. My name is Mary Fossey, and I believe housing is a human right. I'm running for Everett City Council because I want a better quality of life for my neighbors, housed and unhoused. While my resume and professional experience is relevant for this role, it is my lived experience in childhood poverty and homelessness that I believe gives me a perspective needed in this position. In addressing our housing and homelessness crisis and in understanding the nuance of those issues. I was born into low-income housing to a single mom, and now I'm a longtime community advocate and volunteer. Most people locally know me through my environmental justice campaign that secured $5.5 million for my community, or through my equity and infrastructure advocacy as chair of the Delta Neighborhood Association. I was also an Everett Districting Commissioner and now work at the legislature with Representative Emily Wicks. I'm a mother and a survivor and a problem solver, like my neighbors, that wants more proactive leadership addressing the crises before us.
Time is up.
Thank you, Mary. Okay,
Perfect timing, Mary.
District 2, leading off with Paula Ryan. Paula?
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Paula Ryan. I am running for Everett City Council District 2. I have over 20 years of professional, educational, volunteer, and political experience, and most notably for today's forum, I previously worked for the Affordable Housing Program at the Federal Home Loan Bank of Seattle. I've studied affordable housing and land use policy during grad school at the Evans School of Public Affairs. I've worked on housing policy at both the King County Council and in my current role as the legislative aide to Snohomish County Councilmember Megan Dunn. I've also volunteered in service and leadership capacities within overnight women's shelter and housing organizations, including Housing Hope. I firmly believe in the housing first model and that a person experiencing homelessness must have a safe, decent, and affordable place to live first before their underlying reasons for experiencing homelessness can be addressed. I'm also supportive of the city's Rethink Housing efforts to address housing affordability in Everett, and I'm just really glad to be here this morning and look forward to answering your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Paula. And Greg Lineberry.
Good morning. I'm Greg Lineberry. My wife Teresa and I live in the Port Gardner neighborhood. Our family, kids and 3 grandkids, live in the Holly neighborhood in Everett. I currently work for Lake Stevens School District as the Safety, Security, and Health Specialist. I retired in June from my job as a captain with the Everett Police Department after 32 and a half years working in service to our community. As a police officer, I didn't just work for the community, I also lived in Everett for most of my career. I'm a veteran, having proudly served in the United States Army. I'm deeply involved in our community. In addition to working for you as a police officer, I've served on the board of directors for Boys and Girls Clubs of Snohomish County.
30 seconds.
I currently serve on the board for Domestic Violence Services of Snohomish County, and I've been a member of the Everett Rotary Club for 18 years, and I'm currently club president. I'm running for Everett City Council because I loved working for this community. I think I share your values and vision for Everett, a robust, safe, healthy community with affordable housing and universal shelter. And I think after 32 years of working for the community that I have the experience and knowledge that is needed to help us address our community problems and some of the crises that Councilman Roberts mentioned and achieve our vision. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. And we'll go to District 4, Liz Vogelli. Liz, you're up.
Hello, housing. It is the reason we are gathered here today. We need more housing in all shapes and sizes and at all price points. My name is Liz Vogelli, and I am running for re-election to the Everett City Council, District 4. I have been advocating and fighting for various types of housing since my journey on council began. I will not stop. I have surrounded myself with and learned from other great leaders on the subject, and I will continue on the path of housing stability for all. There are many people who have yet to understand the complexity of the issue, and as a council member and public leader, I will work diligently to bring this information to them and work towards a healthy and housed city for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. Marianne, I think I'll make a little adjustment on the time notice.
Sure.
Let's give a 50-second notice, and so candidates will know they have 10 seconds to wrap up.
Okay.
Tommy Rubatino. Tommy.
Hi, my name is Tommy Rubatino. I'm running for City Council in District 4. My family's lived here in Everett for over 100 years. I was born and raised here, and I love Everett. I've had the opportunity to live in North Everett, Central Everett, and now South Everett, and so I've gotten to understand the lay of the land and what it looks like to have housing and also be unable to afford housing in several different areas of the city. I'm currently experiencing that right now. I'm one of those families. I'm married with 2 kids and one on the way, and we're one of those families who currently it doesn't look like we are going to be able to afford a house if things stay the same way that they are. And so I hope to be a voice for the many people, many families in our city who are dealing with the same thing. And my experience as a pastor and a teacher with many families will inform that in great ways. Thank you.
Thank you, Tommy. And District 5, Denise Chatters.
Good morning. My name's Demi Chatters, and I'm running for the Everett City Council in District 5. I'm a former small business owner, and I've worked in the real estate industry and in public service agencies in King and Snohomish County. My volunteer experience includes working with organizations that serve children and marginalized communities, as well as community advocacy work around issues in public education. My educational background is in business marketing and leadership, and I'm currently a director of operations at a local law firm, as well as a Snohomish County Human Rights Commissioner. My priorities and values reflect my commitment to our community by focusing on supporting our local businesses and ensuring that our working families are not left behind in our collective economic recovery from COVID, which puts housing right at the center. We have a lot of complex challenges that we have to confront, and that includes increasing affordable housing stock, recognizing housing as a human right, reaching out to underserved and under-resourced populations. My background provides me with the perspective and the experience to effectively serve our community on the next council, while specifically centering the needs of our working families.
Thank you, Demi. And Ben Zorlingo. Ben?
Thanks. I appreciate the chance to connect and to learn about this. I've lived in a range of housing types here, including 0-bedroom studio, then a 1-bedroom on Casino Road with my wife, and then a 2-bedroom apartment on Holly Drive, saving for about a decade before we bought a single-family house in Silver Lake. And that's when we got involved in the neighborhood group in the mix of single-family, apartments, condos, and townhouses. That's the housing I'm most familiar with. Over 30 years, I've spent a lot of time wrangling with developers and builders. I understand the desire of homeowners to preserve neighborhood character and the investment they've made. I want to avoid expensive fights and delays and still get the density and varied housing types we need. We've got to listen to different stakeholders and work on strategies such as those from the Rethink Housing effort. Builders I've talked to make many of the same suggestions for both single and multifamily housing, market rate and non-market rate housing. If we carefully balance impacts and density and communicate well to avoid the unnecessary conflicts, I'm convinced we can make real improvements in affordability and availability in the first term of this new council. Thanks.
Thank you, Ben.
Excuse me, Fred. Before we continue, I just realized this could be confusing for some folks who aren't as familiar with the districts as perhaps some others are. And so I'm going to challenge all of the candidates in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, your personal picture screen, the 3 dots. If you click on that and go down to rename, if you would put the district next to your name, the district you are running for. Paula has already done that. Way to go, Paula. She's an example to us all. So again, the top right-hand corner of your photo, the 3 dots, click on that. Down at the bottom, it says rename and put the district. Great. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Okay, first question is an open-ended question. Is intended to get to your top of mind thinking in regards to housing in Everett. And the question is simply, what is your primary solution to increase affordable housing in Everett? We'll start with District 2, Greg Lineberry.
Thank you. Well, I think that zoning is one of the critical issues. Creating accessory dwelling units, being able to approve those and adjust zoning, increasing density. I'd love to see a higher density along some of our transit corridors where we can already accept that density without changing the character of the neighborhoods that surround that. I'm a strong advocate for renovation in the Everett Transit Center. We've got a lot of city property down there that I think frankly has a much better, higher use to the citizens of Everett with a housing center there and a retail center and transit-oriented housing. And it's time for the city to show leadership and take the lead in dedicating that to a housing project that helps address and improve our housing density. I'm also a supporter of condominium reform. We've taken steps for that, but I believe that home ownership is
15 seconds.
Towards supporting families as they want to move into larger homes and build equity. And I have always supported condominium liability reform to help do that and to encourage builders to improve and create more condominiums that can build equity. Thank you.
Thank you. And Paul Roberts.
The issues that are addressed in Rethink Housing, I think, really do take this issue on. So that means increasing the housing variety, means developing along urban corridors, it's transit-oriented development, affordability, meaning, and I'll come back to that, and displacement. On the affordability side, we really need to look at the housing issue holistically. There are many people who can afford to work within the housing market, and many who cannot. And the disparity between incomes and housing costs has never been greater, at least to my knowledge, in working in this field for almost 50 years. So the key here is to deal with the affordability question as well as the supply question. So there's a significant supply.
15 seconds.
And so we've got to find more resources, and that's certainly what I will be working on and have been working on for my career.
Thank you, Paul. I had intended to call Paula Ryan, but we have a Paul and a Paula, and I guess I messed that up. So I will go to Paula with your answer for District 2, please.
Great. And both our last names start with R too. So
okay, all the more excuse.
So I agree. It's important that we address the supply and demand for housing in our region and correct that imbalance that we are experiencing right now, which is leading to record numbers of homelessness and record numbers of housing inaffordability. Everett's in a difficult geographic area since we're almost surrounded by water, so expanding out isn't an option. So going up is our options, and I'd like to see those types of housing along transit corridors and over where the future light rail station is going to come, hopefully sometime in at least my children's lifetime. I think it's also important to address affordable housing unit availability right now, since the current wait time for a person to receive a housing voucher and a place to live is 8 to 9 years. So having more affordable housing options for people who are in our low income spectrum, I think would be really important as well.
Thank you. And back to District 1, Mary Fossey.
Thanks. I think with the affordable housing and our planning overall, we just need to be really thoughtful and intentional with how we're looking at, there's not going to be one silver bullet in solving this. It has to be holistic and comprehensive planning, looking at a variety of things, everything from zoning and especially, funding and that collaboration of working with our regional and state and federal partners. We can't solve this alone just on a municipal or county level, because this is a nationwide problem. So I think that kind of collaboration in making those concerted, plans intentional as far as like our comp plans and single family zoning, find money, we need more funding.
Thank you, Mary. And going to District 4, Tommy Rubatino.
I think primarily we need to address zoning, we need to address permits. Everett has been at the short end of the stick in our county for a while now, and it is very difficult to get things built, whether it's housing or commercial or industry. And the fact is we need to increase supply through creative ideas. We need to be willing to listen to new ideas, listen to people from a variety of places to work with what works and to deal with the huge issue of the missing middle right now. And we, especially in South Everett, we have areas that are in desperate need of some new ideas, of some refreshing updates, and the only way we're going to be able to do that is by dealing with these issues specifically. Thank you.
Thank you. And Liz McGilling?
The primary solution to having affordable housing in the city of Everett is to allow more of it. There are various ways to do that, and that has a lot to do with ordinances, with zoning and land use. I was looking for my single family zoning map. It is online. I found this one instead because it didn't work. There's 80% of our housing in Everett is single family. That is a humongous yellow chunk of land. We need more housing in all price points in all parts of the city, not just on the transit lines. What we need is transit to go to all of our houses so we can stop driving and start walking. But here we are with housing.
Thank you, Liz. And District 5, Ben Zarlingo.
I think the people who've talked so far have brought this up pretty clearly. One of the core thing is going to be density, improving density overall. I think everybody agrees on that. We need more variety and flexibility in how we do this. The Rethink Housing proposal covers that really very well. One of the other issues, though, that's core in this is, as Liz had said, there are a lot of our it's single family for much of the city, and we need to do things that will be acceptable to the single family neighborhood so we don't end up with big that delay this and effectively stop positive action in this. So I think a focus here is on flexibility in those single family zones where we can evolve those in ways that people will accept.
15 seconds.
Okay, thank you, Ben. And Demi Chatters?
Yeah, so the Rethink Housing Plan has been mentioned. That has a lot of really great suggestions. We definitely need to address our zoning, right, and our regulatory environment. We have to permit not just new housing, but specifically low-cost types of housing that will serve folks at the lower income levels as well as the middle income levels. We need to incentivize that building, and so we have to create those partnerships and those relationships that allow that to take place. We also have to deal with the issue of funding these projects. And, I know that tax, the T word, is not a popular subject, but, we can do things like adjusting our sales tax to allow for a 0.1% increase to fund some of those affordable housing projects. And so these are things that we need to go out into the community, and we need to educate folks about this, about how meeting these the density needs will help improve housing availability and housing stock overall, and will impact housing costs for families.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving to the next question. Some of you touched on this a little bit in your last answer, but maybe you could expand a bit more. The question is, would you support upzoning for infill development? For example, allowing a landowner to build a multifamily improvement in an R1 zone. And I will tack on to that, that NIMBY opposition is a very real thing, not just in Everett where we've experienced that, but around the country. That has really stopped increase of density in single family neighborhoods very, very effectively. So you might include in your comment, what is the role of neighborhoods in saying no, not in our neighborhood? We're going to start with District 4, and Liz, you'll lead off here.
have all sorts of things to say. I don't, only a minute, and there I've gone wasting 10 seconds. Last night I read something. The time for subjective input is when zoning plans and design guidelines are written. After that, the vast majority of projects should be either approved or disapproved on the basis of compliance with those predetermined rules. And I say that because now is the time to get the subjective input from all of the NIMBYs and all of the other people so that we can create a beautiful land use comprehensive plan that, as Ben had mentioned, can get the single family homeowners into it. Oh, and the actual question was upzoning? Yes. I do like to have some upzoning in this city and deal with the NIMBYs before it's an issue and before time creates delay, creates cost, creates all of the horrible things, and no housing. Thank you.
Liz and Tommy.
Yeah, so, many of us have already mentioned zoning, and that seems pretty clear that that many of us are willing to rethink that, and that, if you read the Rethink report, that's something that is necessary, and yes, there's going to be some fights over that. There's going to be a lot of discussion. We need to figure out a way that we can respect our citizens, we have we have examples over the years of where we try something was going to be built and then it wasn't because the neighbors didn't like it, and unfortunately when that happens too much we slide backwards, and so we have to be willing to talk through this with our neighbors and be neighborly about it while still moving forward, and that takes governance. That takes being willing to be strong.
Thank you, Tommy. And Demi Chatters.
Thank you. So a lot of the folks who express concerns about, how will density changes impact the neighborhood? These folks are also very frustrated about the fact that housing costs in their neighborhoods are just skyrocketing. Their children are being priced out of being able to live in the neighborhoods that they've grown up in. Their grandchildren cannot attend the schools that their children attended because they can't afford these houses. So we have to communicate with the neighborhood what the benefits are to changing our zoning regulations to increase density, and we have to do it in a sensible way that we certainly out to destroy the character of any neighborhoods. However, things evolve. The world does change. We do have had increases in population, and we do need to accommodate all of our citizens here in the city of Everett. And that does require looking at building up rather than focusing on building out, increasing density where it makes sense and not increasing it where it doesn't make sense or where it has a negative environmental impact. For example, like with the Wood Creek issue that folks in my area are dealing with.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we go to the next question, I did
not get to answer that question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Who did that?
This is Ben Zarlingo.
I'm sorry, Ben.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry?
Go ahead, Ben.
Well, I've been involved in some fights like this on both sides, and our neighborhood actually was ready to accept a couple of 100-foot tall towers at the north end of Silver Lake. And the reason for that was that there were useful and creative trade-offs. And I think the same thing can happen in single-family zones, but I don't advocate eliminating those single-family zones. We can do things like attached and detached accessory dwellings. We can improve density in ways that people will accept. And that's really part of my background in neighborhood work over 30 years here. I think there's a great deal we can do to effectively increase density without provoking most of those fights. And of course, we'll still focus this mostly on other areas. The biggest density increases will be where there's transit and that sort of thing. But I do think we can do a lot in single-family zones without eliminating effectively the single-family zones.
Fred, I believe Paul Roberts also didn't have an opportunity to answer this question.
I think it was called one.
District 1 and District 2.
Okay, I apologize. So let's see. Go ahead, Paul.
Well, thanks. First of all, the short answer is yes. would support upzoning. And I have a history of fighting NIMBYism as appropriate, including Claire's Place, the Norton Grand project, the Pallet Shelter project, and elsewhere. And I have been the architect of the permitting processes that push forward these kinds of zoning decisions, including planned action and the integration of the State Environmental Policy Act and the Growth Management Act. So that's precisely what we need to do. And it is what we have done in the downtown and other areas, Southwest Everett and other areas of the city. So yes, we do have those tools. I have actually designed those tools and administered those tools. And it is what we need to do to improve density and housing types.
Thank you, Paul. Mary?
Restrictive single-family zoning has been historically problematic. In my neighborhood, it contributed to economically disadvantaged schools and pollution and segregation. And I am very conscious of the need to deconcentrate poverty in this city. And having been homeless as a child and now community leader in a neighborhood that has suffered from lack of investment, it's a prime, concern for me. We need to have our planning and policy approach prioritize communities disproportionately burdened by pollution and economic and racial inequality. Almost as important as our housing plans and zoning modifications and everything, we also need to make sure that we have sufficient investments in social infrastructure as well. I support inclusive zoning and permitting to encourage a wider variety of housing. The Tacoma Plan and Everett's Housing Action Plan realize this, and I think EHA did well with their initial Baker Heights legacy design and Housing Hope with their Norton design when it came to building within a community's needs and character. I'm a history buff, so I think they did well.
Thank you, Mary. Paul Ryan?
Yeah, in short, I'm also supportive of upzoning, but would prioritize infill housing and historic preservation of properties in the downtown core, over by the future light rail station at the Everett Mall, and prioritize that over smaller single-family neighborhoods like the Wood Creek neighborhood that has one road overpass going over I-5 to get to that's over 60 years old at this point, and it wasn't built with density in mind. So I'd like to see smart growth and growth in a way that makes sense with our current transit infrastructure and also making considerations for future transit and walkability and bikeability as well.
Thank you. And Greg Lineberry.
Yeah, briefly, agree with all these comments. Of course, there's a role for upzoning, and I support it. And you can do that without significantly altering the character of the neighborhood of the community. You have to do it in a way that builds trust with neighbors. It has to be open and transparent. It has to involve them, accept their input. I've heard the term used before. It has to do more good than it does harm. I built one of my homes in an R1 zone off Mukilteo Boulevard, and it included a living space for one of my family members that needed care and support. I did that in a way that was within the requirements, but there are clearly opportunities that are lost in our current regulations. Accessory dwelling units, again, is a great example of that. And so I think we can move towards our goals and help adjust that supply issue through upzoning, and we can do it in a way that's responsible and that
15 seconds.
Supports them.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I think I got everyone on that question. So move on now to the next, and that is if the county does not implement the state authorized 0.1% sales tax for affordable housing and developmental services, would you support its passage in the city of Everett? We'll start with District 5. Ben, you can lead off.
Off mute there. I am not sure about that yet. I haven't gone through that in enough detail, and I am cautious about sales tax increases because of their effect on business activity. We already have relatively high sales taxes, and so I certainly wouldn't rule that out, but I want to look at that in the context of some of the other potential sales tax increases that might come from transit, and then other general tax increases as well. People are sensitive to this, and in particular with sales tax, I'm a little concerned about business activity because I think one of the ways we can fix some of the problems in affordability is on the jobs end. We want to make sure that we do all we can to provide the best jobs we can and the best pay here in the city, because
15
that
seconds.
fixes part of the affordability problem. So I certainly wouldn't rule that out. It seems to make sense, but I'd want to take a look at that in the context of the other things, because if we can provide significantly more jobs, that's a rising tide that'll float everybody's boats.
Thank you, Ben. And Demi Chatters?
Yes, so absolutely, I would support that. The fact is, in the state of Washington, we have a very regressive taxing structure in general. That is a problem that those who are elected leaders, those who are community advocates, that we need to push our state legislature on reforming our taxation system to bring it in line with something that is less regressive, or even better, a progressive taxation system. But the fact is, we have the system we have currently, and we have to deal with the housing crisis under the system we have, not under the system as we wish it would be. And that means that we have to keep options like the sales tax increase on the table, and we have to implement those, because we cannot continue to wait to ensure that we have appropriate levels of affordable housing stock to meet the needs of our citizens.
Thank you. And back up to District 1, Mary Fossey.
Thanks. Yeah, I think your budget is about your values, and what we invest in is indicative of who we are. And we need to invest in things that are vital to our community, especially housing and social infrastructure. I think that the implementation of 1590 would be more impactful at the county level. That would make it so we could have a more impactful project. But at the municipal level, if the county doesn't step up, then yes, of course, then we would have to. I mean, that's what we're doing for the federal government falling short, is we're filling in those gaps and those holes. For a firmer financial footing, we can look at a variety of other things to compensate for that kind of investment, and lobbying with our regional and state and federal partners to, change things, such as, upside down tax code, and the doing some of like modifying the 16-bed IMD exclusion, and a variety of other things that can make it more impactful investments otherwise to counter.
Thank you, Mary. Paul Roberts.
Well, thanks. Yes, I would consider this tax, but first, it really is best at the county level. Everett has disproportionately carried its weight in terms of the housing issues, and that weight needs to be distributed throughout the county. And so I would prefer that as the approach. Secondly, I think that there is a question, particularly for Everett, with our budget crisis. It doesn't help us to add so many tax measures, and we are going to have to ask the public for more resources to do the things we need to do. So if we ask for too much and all of them fail, we're back to square one. Actually, we're in worse shape. So we have to be careful about how we do this. I would consider this, but the preferred approach is to take this on and for that burden to be distributed throughout, which is where the housing issues are, not just in Everett.
Thank you, Paul. Greg Lineberry.
Thank you. Yeah, sales tax is extremely regressive. I don't think it's good for business. I don't think it's good for members of our lower income residents. It's not a stable source of income. It fluctuates significantly with economic conditions. It may be our best option, but that has to be demonstrated. One thing we don't do well is explain what we're going to do with new taxes and then demonstrate to the taxpayer that we're being responsible and effective with the funding they provide. And I really want to underscore that. We need the resources, but you can't ask for support for a tax increase, particularly a sales tax that's regressive, without explaining specifically what you're going to do with that, what the benefits are going to be, and how you're going to solve problems. And so I think this question demonstrates that. Just asking, hard for me to say, yeah, absolutely, I'm on board for that. Show me what we're going to do with it. Show me why that's the most effective means to reach our goals. And yeah, of course, I'd be supporting.
Thank you, Greg. Paula?
The county's Housing Affordability Regional Task Force, the HART report that came out a couple of years ago, identified that that there needs to be governmental intervention in order to address the housing affordability crisis that we're experiencing. And one of the best ways that we can do that is through the gift that the state legislature has given us through 1590. Housing affordability is a regional crisis that we're experiencing and a national crisis. So it does need to be addressed on a regional level. And I think that the county is the best vehicle to implement something like that. I'm confident that it will happen at the county level, but if it does,
I would also prefer to see this as something at the county level before we talk about it as a city, because Everett has already done more than any other community for affordable housing. I would prefer to do more research on something like this before having a completely solid stance, but I believe that in the end, it's important to listen to the voters and for us to understand how we can be more fiscally responsible before increasing taxes. I've had to balance many budgets as a pastor at my church. And, last year when our church members were losing jobs and our operating budget needed to be changed, we didn't ask our people to give more money. We figured out how to make our budgets work. And I believe we can do that in the city as well.
Tommy, Liz?
I really liked what Demi said, so I'm just going to echo that, and that's pretty cool because that means I can listen to other people that sound like they know more than I do about a certain subject. I would like to say, though, that when it comes to homelessness, the City of Everett has about 40% of the population of homelessness within our limits and only 13% of the population. And right now we are getting money from the county that's only reflective of our population as a whole. So although other places are doing some work, some other jurisdictions are doing some work for homelessness, we're doing most of it, and we need to be compensated for that. Can I ask the taxpayers of our city to do that compensation? Probably not. We're the ones suffering. So what Demi said, what Mary said, and convince the voters that what we're going to do is good. We don't have any money.
Okay, thank you. Okay, changing gears a little bit, staying with another aspect of affordable housing, and that is rental rates. As we all know, rental rates are skyrocketing. More and more tenants are finding their apartment homes to become affordable. Could you support some limits on the rate of increase in rental rates? We're going to go back up to District 1 in the start, and Paul, you get to lead off on this one.
Well, thanks, Fred. Clearly the disparity between housing costs and income has never been greater. So I do think we need to consider what would be outside of the box kinds of approaches. So yes, I think we need to consider that, but we also need to consider it once again, first, as a question of supply and demand and why those rates are being driven. And second, as a county-wide kind of proposal. It doesn't really help us to try to affect those changes on too small a scale. I also think there are issues, again, distributing these issues county-wide. There's at least one city that's choosing not to, or appears to be choosing not to have family housing at all. So this is a complex question. I am open to consider it, but it has to be considered within the framework of the marketplace and what will really work.
Mary?
Concept of supply and demand. We've been supposed to be building 1,500 units annually to meet the growth management targets set by the Puget Sound Regional Council, and we've been averaging 231. And the average income needed to afford a 2-bedroom rental is over $36 an hour. It's absolutely insane. So many of my neighbors are being priced out. There are some laws that we have to be mindful of at the state that prevent us from having some restrictions, and anything that we can do within that framework, I am supportive of. And that comes from, I'm also a small time landlord, so I'm absolutely supportive of it.
Thank you, Mary. Paula?
Yeah, I think many people who are renters are also our BIPOC community members and people of color. So I do see this as a racial issue as well, in protecting our BIPOC communities so that they do have paths to home ownership if that's what they choose, is something that's important to me. I do think it is a regional issue that needs to be regionally addressed, and just addressing it in Everett might not be the appropriate avenue for it, but I would take it into consideration about putting a cap on percentage increases that can happen. I hear from constituents all the time that they're being economically evicted from their dwelling unit because they're on a fixed income and their landlord is raising rent at a rate that is just completely unreasonable. So I'd like to see, if there is a cap put in, I'd like to see it more as a percentage based.
Thank you, Paula. Greg?
Look, this is a supply and demand issue, and the rental rate locks and caps do nothing to address that central problem. They treat the symptom and not the disease. And in fact, they're proven and have been shown numerous times to do the very opposite of what is needed. They disincentivize new construction and new rentals that address the supply issue because they take away some of that profit motive. I'm not going to be able to support something that I think in the end is going to have a long-term negative impact. I think there's other ways to address what we're talking about doing that support increasing supply and incentivize increasing supply, but also provide the support that renters need in the midterm until we get ultimately the solution.
15 seconds.
Those are the solutions I support, not something that's going to make the problem worse in the long term.
And going to District 4, Liz?
Real quick, what exactly is the question again?
The question was that as rental rates have skyrocketed, more and more tenants find their apartment homes to be unaffordable. Could you support some limits on increases in rental rates?
Absolutely. Renters need protection just as much or more as homeowners. There are so many things that can be done for renters. Enforce housing and building codes. We need to stop, as I said yesterday, coddling the landlords. What we can do, and maybe even get some revenue out of it, is increase funding for code compliance inspectors to protectively identify violations and respond more quickly. Increase penalties for code violation to discourage non-compliance. Require limited liability companies that own residential property to reveal the identity. Yes, I'm reading out of a book because it is got so many of the answers that we need, and I don't have them all memorized, but by golly, there's so much we can do.
15 seconds.
And ordinances, policy to write that will be helpful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Liz. Tommy?
Yeah, before considering something like putting a limit on rental rates, I would want to do some research into why these rates are going up and what that has to do with the average household income of our neighbors. I was one of those families who was in rental housing. I was in an apartment in the area, and the rates increased to the point where we couldn't afford to live there anymore. So I know the pain of that. I know the pain that our people are dealing with. But I would want to know what the long-term issues are of this, and what actually needs to be taken care of on a deeper level than here on the surface, because we could solve do an easy fix on something only to find out later that didn't actually solve the core problem. And that's what I want to figure out with issues like this, because if we want to retain our neighbors and our people in our city, otherwise they're just going to move on out. We need to be able to give them affordable housing.
Thank you. And finally, District 5, Demi?
Thank you. So controls on rents is a really interesting idea, and it is something that has been employed in a lot of different markets, not just here in the United States, but around the world. And you know, it is correct that this can possibly de-incentivize additional housing units from being built in some manner, but it may be a good interim option to help control the rent so folks are not being actively priced out of their homes and their neighborhoods right now, this is happening right now as we speak. The long-term solution, of course, is we've got to increase the housing stock. We've got to incentivize builders. We have to work with our zoning codes, you know, clean up our regulatory environment. But this could be an interim solution. But we can't think about regulations as something that is static, that has to stay the same forever. They should be dynamic to meet the needs of the people in the moment. And so in this moment, something like that might be really useful. Is it a long-term solution? No. The long-term solution is to build more housing.
Thank you. And Ben?
Well, I parallel Paul and Greg largely in this. I lean against these kind of regulations and limits. I think they really do create a disincentive to build and limit supply. So the other things we've talked about in terms of increasing supply and increasing density are the primary answers here. And once again, to try to improve the job environment. And then where needed, specifically support renters, especially supporting them as an interim fashion so that they can move up to market rate rents as that goes on and as we increase the density and improve the pricing because of that. I think that's a progressive way to do this. And I think it also doesn't institutionalize some of these limits that are going to cause rental housing to decay and limit the creation of new rental housing.
Okay, thank you. And we're at 8:52, so we got 8 minutes left, and we have 8 candidates here. So we're going to move to your closing statements, and we'll each of you will have 1 minute for your close. So we'll start with District 2, Greg Lineberry.
I had 30 seconds. It's great to have more time. Well, thank you for your time today. I loved working for the residents of Everett for over 30 years as a police officer. I loved being a public servant. If any of you ever got an email from me, you know that over my career, I always ended my emails with the closing statement, yours in public service, Greg Lineberry. And I believe in public service, and I believe I was a public servant, and I enjoyed that. I enjoyed the late night phone calls, and I enjoyed solving problems that our citizens have. While it was certainly time for me to retire from police work, I want to continue to work for you and serve you. Our city is facing many critical issues, housing being a critical component that needs immediate solutions and immediate attention. We need experienced, proven leadership. I'm running for Everett City Council because I want to work for you, and I know that I can make a positive difference in our community and help make Everett the community we want it to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Paul Ryan?
Can't hear you, Paula. Paula can't hear you.
I did that famous Zoom oops. Thank you again, everybody, for the opportunity to share today. I believe that safe housing is a basic human right, and will bring my experience in housing policy and direct volunteer experience to council to address housing affordability and homelessness in Everett. When Everett voters passed districts, they sent a loud and clear message that they are ready for more proactive leadership here in Everett, and I will bring that to council. If anybody would like to know more about my policies and background and bio, feel free to visit my website at www.paula4everett.com, or feel free to email me at paula@paulaforeverett.com. And I'm really committed to being responsive to folks in the community. So thank you so much again. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Paula. And District 4, Tommy Rubatino.
As a one-time single dad living in a one-bedroom apartment with 2 kids here in the Everett area, I know what it's like to not feel very hopeful about housing. But I love Everett. I've grown up here. I think that this is an awesome place, and I don't see any reason why it can't continue to be an awesome place. I think that that's going to just involve us working well as a city, being a council that works together, listens to a variety of voices and a variety of ideas, willing to hold ourselves fiscally responsible and be willing to
15
make some
seconds.
tough decisions when it comes to housing. And I am willing to do that. I plan to do that, and I think that that's how we're going to get this done. Thank you.
Thank you. Liz Vogeli?
I'm going.
Sorry, Liz.
Thank you.
I don't know why. Something about me.
There's something about you. I'm going to read a list of accomplishments as I have written them down. And I wasn't planning this, so here goes. Successfully ran 2 grassroots campaigns for City Council in 3 years. Helped bring forward and approve a CWA, or Community Workforce Agreement, in Everett. Completed high school while pregnant, then a single mother. Completed my associate's degree in 2 years. Performed in multiple stage performances. Made it to lead teacher of a Head Start class. Built and helped maintain community gardens. Survived childhood. Survived rape. Birthed 3 children with no drugs. Quit smoking. Taught an anti-racism class. Lead a monthly march for 4+ years. I've led housing roundtables.
15 seconds.
Voted to approve housing. Wrote and performed a song about its not passing on YouTube. Stepped in front of a truck using reckless driving at a homeless camp sweep. Got my bike back. Survived my mom and husband dying. Gathered signatures and advocated for police reform Initiative 940. And I ask really good questions. And there's a longer list.
Thank you, Liz. Ben Sarlingo. Ben?
Mute. Well, by necessity, we're addressing a lot of negative and difficult issues here in this today. But part of this is because we have a good problem in that it's a wonderful city. I've loved living here for almost 40 years now. And the problem we have, of course, is it's a nice place that people want to move to, but that raises all the rents and the prices. So I've talked to a lot of voters recently, and I've been reassured. They're generous and supportive of a lot of the kinds of actions we're talking about here, including some of the things that changes in zoning and standards that'll improve density. That's all if they're convinced that we're listening to them carefully and that we're spending their taxes well and carefully.
15
And
seconds.
that's a concern I have right now in terms of some of the homeless problem. There's a lot of that's very visible and not getting better. And I want to make sure we are doing the best we can and that the public is convinced we're doing the best we can, so they'll continue to support us.
Time. Oh,
Okay, thank you.
perfect, Ben.
Demi Chatters.
I'm running for the city council because I love Everett. I love our communities. This is where I have raised my children. My husband and I have lived here for going on a quarter century pretty soon. Everett is a fantastic place. But the reality of leadership in Everett is that it has often not represented many of the voices in the community. And that's one of the reasons why I'm running as well, because I want to be someone on the council that passes the mic to other folks in the BIPOC community, to Black folks, to our Latinx folks, to our queer folks. Let's hear from more than just the folks that we have heard from so far. So when we talk about incorporating community perspectives, we need to broaden the spectrum of what that means. It also means that we need to build local partnerships with other local leadership. And my endorsement list, if you have an opportunity to go to my website, it includes a list of a lot of folks who are elected leaders who endorse me because they know that I can build those partnerships. And one of those endorsements that I'd just like to highlight is the Housing Action Alliance of Snohomish County, Washington Housing Action Fund. And I would be honored to serve as your District 5 council member. Thank you.
Thank you, Demi. And up to District 1, Mary Fossey.
For your time and your work you're doing in our community. This work is particularly important to me because I was one of those families. And it's important to support people who have not always been heard in policy and decision-making arenas. And that means we value lived experiences and diverse perspectives over traditionally represented ones. It's a great avenue to find new solutions. For instance, a lot of you know about my Delta Kids program because I know childhood poverty and the barriers families face. Amidst the pandemic, I founded and secured funding for the successful Delta Kids program to bring school and art supplies to the most economically disadvantaged school in the county. I think it's time for a fresh
15
perspective
seconds.
on Everett City Council, and one that doesn't really see homelessness as just a problem, but more of a symptom, and one that actively approaches things with a lens of equity to their approach. So thank you for inviting me today to this wonderful panel. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mary. And Paul Roberts.
Well, thanks to the consortium for putting this event on. I am running for one more term, but I bring years of experience, particularly in the housing area. And knowing how to develop those projects and being willing to stand up to NIMBYism if that's the issue and get through those issues. Increasing housing variety, increasing housing density, developing along urban corridors are all critical. But part of the reality is we really have a different world that we will be facing in the next 4 years and beyond. And that brings together housing, it brings together climate issues, it brings together transportation issues, and it deals with urbanization of our system. That's a new world. And I bring a lot of experience to that. And that's what I'm hoping to do if I'm reelected. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Paul. I thank you all, not just for being here and for participating in this forum, but I thank you for your interest in housing, your interest and care for the City of Everett, for your willingness to serve in this role as one of our council members. I will say that we are so fortunate to have so many talented, intelligent, well-informed candidates for these offices. I said earlier, we've been doing this for a number of years, and I remember when we did these forums and we would ask questions on housing, and frankly, most of the candidates hadn't thought a lot about housing. And the answers we got were very generic. They were very vague because, it just wasn't a big issue. That has changed. And we see from the thoughtfulness and the depth of the answers that you've provided here, that this is an issue that you are giving careful thought to. So on behalf of the consortium, I thank you for that. I want to thank all that have joined in and have listened in to this forum. We hope that this has been helpful to you in determining your choice of candidates, in this election that is soon upon us. As always, I encourage you all to vote. That is how we all participate in this democracy. So with that, we will call this done, and we'll declare success. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Fred.
Thank you.
Be well.
Thank you.